Good morning, Austin. Hope everyone is having a great morning. I am Troy Schlicker, host of the Austin Spotlight, and today I am joined by Jayme Shiarla, mindset coach here in Austin, Texas as well, and getting the chance to connect with her and hopefully bring you guys some great information today. Thank you for joining, Jayme.
Thank you for having me, Troy. I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be fun. So I always kind of like to start off for people kind of getting to know their origin story, right? Especially being in Austin, having so many people that have relocated here, and it almost seems like there's almost no native Austinites, which obviously isn't entirely true. I do come across them. I'm sure you do too, from time to time. But so what's your origin story? Did you grow up here? Did you move here like many of us have?
Yeah, so I am a transplant, that's for sure. I just moved here back in December of last year. Born and raised in Ohio, in the absolute middle of nowhere. Like, we would have bring your tractor to school day. So like nothing, flat ground, businesses not even open past like 10 o'clock. Like, yep. So super, super small area. And then prior to moving here, I was living in Stamford, Connecticut. So all over the place, but yep, just got here in December.
Very nice. What drew you to Austin or made you decide to kind of head this way?
So this is probably not going to kickstart to make me sound like very wise of a person, but adventurous at least. I had never even been to Texas before, and I personally have not even owned a TV in over 3.5 years. So I didn't know that Austin was like this thriving city. My lease was about to be up in Connecticut, and I'm like, all right, let's just go adventure. My business is virtual, so I can work from anywhere. And yeah, I just Googled best places to live. California popped up, Texas and Colorado. And like I said, I didn't know Austin was a thriving area, and they just happened to be the first people that called me back. And I was like, yeah, sure, send me the lease. And they're like, do you want to see it first? I'm like, nah, we'll figure it out when I get there. So moved here, didn't know anybody, gave away everything that didn't fit in my car, loaded up my dog, and 27 hours later showed up here. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it actually sounds, not that much different for me as well too. I had been here once because at the time I had an aunt and uncle that lived up in Georgetown, and so I visited about 3 months before moving down, just because I was like, well, let's see what a little bit about what it's like. But same thing, yeah, called up and said, hey, I just need to sign a lease because I'm going to move down in a month. And so that is rather adventurous. I don't think most people, as a realtor, that's not how most people do it.
Right,
when they decide to move to Austin, usually there's a little more planning and research. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, we're thinking about here versus here. And so that's really cool. Were you prepared so I mean, your first summer obviously has, I want to say, come to an end, but it's really still Texas weather for another few months before it starts to cool down a little bit. How was your first Texas summer?
So maybe it was also because I was mentally prepared. Everybody was like, oh, you're moving to Texas because it's warmer weather. I'm like, sure, I guess. But I got here in December, and a week later it snowed, and they're like, we never see snow. And I'm from Ohio, so like I knew snow. And then the snowpocalypse happened, and I was like, I was made for this, guys. Like, I got it. You need anything? Like, this is my wheelhouse. And everyone that I've talked to has even said, surprisingly, it's not as hot as what it usually gets in Texas, for Austin at least. So I've actually really, really enjoyed it. And I will say it seems like, at least here in Austin, not Houston, but it's been more of like a drier heat. So it just literally is hot, where when I would go back and visit Ohio, it was like a muggy hot. Sure. So I've very much enjoyed this summer.
It is definitely all relative, right? Like it's the mindset. I've already talking mindset. A good friend of mine who always kind of, his phrase is, the key to life is low expectations, right? If you go in with reasonable expectations, you can kind of handle anything that comes your way. And yes, this summer has been cooler than most. I think because of all the rain and some different aspects like that. But if you go back to the humidity side of things, I get people that move here like, oh, it's so humid, I can't stand it. And then other people who are like, oh, it's so dry here, I'm always having to put on lotion. And so it really is kind of what you're used to and what your expectations are that really drive what your experience is.
Absolutely. 100%. The bugs, I will say I was not prepared for the bugs. The bugs was, that's been the only part.
Well, I mean, so like you mean like the big bugs, like bigger
Oh
spiders or
yeah.
bigger those? Okay, because
I swear, like when I was in Connecticut, I'm like, maybe they're spraying massive chemicals because I like rarely ever saw any type of insect. And like now there's all these crazy, creepy crawlies. I'm like, okay, we'll manage.
I feel, yeah, no, and definitely some of those things are unique. I mean, not unique to Texas, but definitely different than they are up north. I do feel like mosquito. So I'm originally from Michigan and Minnesota, and so mosquitoes, I think, in the middle of summer can be worse up there just because
Oh yeah.
there's so much more water for them. But yeah, you never had to deal with a scorpion or tarantula while you were up in those
Exactly.
areas for sure. So.
Absolutely.
You mentioned your business being virtual, so we'll kind of tell us a little bit about what you do for work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a mindset transformation coach, certified life coach, and NLP practitioner, which stands for neuro linguistic programming. So essentially, I believe that everything starts and ends within the minds, and we literally are the only thing getting in our own way. And so, primarily, my business is I work with individuals one on one, and there's a lot of reasoning to it, but that's a big secret sauce part of that as well, which we can dive into later. But I coach my clients one on one, all virtually. Even before COVID made Zoom cool, that was already something that I was doing prior to. I also do group coaching. So, kind of like a higher level of like whether it be productivity, goal setting, boundary setting, just managing your schedule, becoming more self aware, all of those fun things that are super important on a tactical side in our lives. I do that for corporations. I do that for just different groups. And then I also run in-person wellness retreats. So that is one that definitely is very much in person. Next one will be my 4th year there is in Santa Catalina, Veraguas, Panama. It'll be March 6th through the 12th of next year. So super excited about that.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. What, so we have obviously before you moved to Connecticut, you'd already kind of started the business that way. What kind of led you down that path to start a coaching practice? Was it something that you'd kind of planned on in college, or was it something you kind of fell into? How did that transpire?
Excellent question. So I'm a big believer that, and I want to say this first and foremost too. You will probably hear me quote or drop quotes like nobody's business this entire time because I like live in quotes. But definitely, what I have found in my journey thus far is that we can only connect the dots looking backward. So kind of looking at all of my past experiences leading to this point, it very much makes sense how I ended up getting into the realm of coaching. But it was never really anything that I desired. Ever since I was like 5, I wanted to do hair. So in a very brief scenario, I'll give you how diverse of a resume I have. I used to do hair, still licensed today. I just don't practice anymore. I used to be a massage therapist with 10 specialty certifications. I worked for a chiropractor, did physical therapy and the massage therapy. I dabbled in network marketing. I used to be a facilitator for grieving kids due to death of a loved one. In doing hair, I used to do hair on the deceased in the funeral home. I waitressed. I was a Zumba instructor. I sold life insurance. I worked corporate as a product consultant for a Fortune 100 company. So very, very diverse background of careers. And it just kind of all of that, plus the school of hard knocks from my diverse upbringing of toxic, broken home I grew up in, drugs, alcohol, suicide, death, you name it, abusive relationships. I experienced all of the above as well. So it's kind of like my mess became my message. And how I actually grew into transforming out of this lack of self-worth and thinking that I could like deserve at anything, whether it be from a career standpoint, a personal standpoint, even just being on this earth. I had to work through a lot of my own mindset. So between the work I've put in on myself, which has been some deep work that is still always ongoing, my just obsession with learning how the brain works, my actual certification in coaching and NLP, that kind of all led and I mean, I obviously have a ridiculous amount of energy all the time too. So motivating people was always my jam. I coached gymnastics, I coached special needs, I coached competitive cheer. So coach was always part of my title. So to tie this all up into a package, those were kind of the different steps of life that got me to this point.
Nice. So like, obviously there was a long list of different kind of jobs there. Was it something that you thought those different types of jobs would be interesting, and then either you got bored or they weren't as interesting as you thought, or there was another opportunity that seemed interesting? Like, what kind of prompted some of those changes? Not that it's bad. It's actually something I believe in, is, trying different things to find out what you're passionate about, because there's a lot of things that I think there's a lot of people out there who maybe aren't doing what they're passionate about, which is fine. But in some cases, they don't even know they would be passionate about it unless they try it, just because it's not something that's really hit their radar. So what kind of led you to trying all these different things in your life?
So, first of all, one thing I do want to point out that you just mentioned is the word passion has become so sexy in social media. And I think that everybody is always like, it's just not my passion. I'm just not passionate about it. I think you can grow into a passion. I never thought I was going to be passionate about life insurance, but at one point I was. So like I said, with the hair thing, I mean, I grew up practically in a hair salon. My mom's best friend owned a salon. So I was there after school, like every day. And I just very much enjoyed it. I was always super creative. So I liked that aspect. And then initially because I actually graduated with my license in cosmetology when I graduated high school. So I started working for myself as soon as I graduated. And actually, I was going to go to school for business management as a backup, but would also be something that could tie into what I was doing. I absolutely hated it. And so at that point, it was like, okay, well, what can I do that I would potentially be good at that could tie in with hair and can keep me on my mom's medical insurance as a full-time student? And that was when randomly at Easter one day, my sister had a neck injury and I was just working on her. She's like, are your hands tired? I was like, no. She's like, you should do this. So I'm like, okay. So I was like, it ties in well. And, started doing kind of both of that. But it was, for me, I was just always chasing a sense of happiness. And so I would always create this vision. Okay, once I get through this and once I meet this goal, I'm going to be happy. But then I wasn't. And then I all of a sudden would just lose interest in what it is that I was doing. And I had to decide okay, was it just because I was feeling uninspired? Was it just not a good fit for me? What did all of it mean? And
so, well, I was saying partially. So from what it sounds like, again, coming from where you came from, the broken home and some of those struggles, the thought pattern early on probably was, oh, well, let me go find something else to fulfill that happiness for me. And in doing the cosmetology, doing the massage therapy, doing the working in a funeral home, that somehow that the activities themselves would bring the happiness versus the happiness being intrinsically within you in doing the different things that you enjoy.
Yep. And so that was exactly it. Also, I have two sisters that are way older than me. And so I was always the spoiled one. I was always selfish, that if I didn't get my way, I wasn't happy. So very early on, I had trained my brain that I can't make this about me. Don't be selfish, Jayme. So I always poured into other people. If I can make other people happy, if I can make other people feel good, then I can feel good. And so I was chasing a level of happiness, and I was chasing this void that never seemed to actually be filled. And so I would always keep myself super, super busy in pouring into others. And then the second that I wasn't, I hated myself. And I would burn out because I was running on fumes, just trying to take care of everybody, but I wasn't even taking care of me. And I would feel sorry for myself and think that I wasn't doing enough and I wasn't successful enough. I wasn't enough. So yeah, very much that. Every ounce of it, even though I didn't realize it was happening, I was always chasing goals that would make other people happy, but it was never something that made me happy. And that was nobody's problem but my own, because I didn't actually know what made me happy.
Sure. You mentioned kind of passion as well too. And yes, it's definitely a word that gets thrown around quite a bit these days. And I do think, like you mentioned, there the way that it gets thrown around now is, oh, I find this thing that just completely makes me so happy that I want to do it 24/7, and it's, and then my life's better and all these other kind of things. And it's, again, that's not how I would really define it at all either. But, like but because even stuff that you enjoy doing, again, you doing this as a mindset coach, there are going to be days where it's tough. Like there's just no such thing, right? Like, as someone who likes to work out, I kind of always equate it that way. There's people who, I just don't have the motivation to work out. Well, I don't have the motivation to work out every day, but once you start to build that habit, it just becomes much easier to do it, even on the days that maybe you aren't passionate about it, and see those results. And in a lot of cases, doing like there's times when the thought of the activity is passionate enough to get you to do it on certain days. And then there's other days where doing the activity brings about the passion that you had for it. And so there's a lot of differences. Now there's plenty of people from a job standpoint or working out or eating healthy that it's just not for them at all, right? There's definitely things that you can't force to enjoy or have passion from, but there's definitely a give and take there versus it just being something that suddenly I strap on this rocket fuel of passion to propel me forward.
Well, and exactly to that point, like the adult version of to me, how I would describe passion is like a kid who's like, hey, can I have a puppy? Can we get a puppy? I promise I'm going to love it. And I'm going to take care of it. And it's going to be so great. And I cannot wait to get this puppy. We're just going to have an awesome time. And you get the puppy, and the first week you're like, oh my gosh, I love this puppy. This puppy's great. But then you're like, oh, well, it just peed on the floor. And now you want me to clean that up? Wait, you mean I have to feed it and I have to take it on walks? Like, maybe I don't love this idea of the puppy anymore. That's how adults treat finding their passion within work. And very much with my clients, when I coach them through, like it's like, I call it my beauty beast boot camp, because like I show up with like, this tender loving care, but I'm also not afraid to kick your butt, where it's like, okay, listen, like not every day are you going to be super stoked to get up and do your passion. Not every day you're going to love your job, but you are also more than just your job. And if you're relying on that passion to fuel your happiness, that novelty is going to run off or wear off at some point. And what are you left with? So why is it that you're actually doing it? What are you doing it for? Is it coming from the right place?
Sure. No, and I think kind of going back to your multiple different jobs, and I'm sure there was a lot of overlap in some instances as well too. I think for a lot of people, they sometimes want to get too singularly focused, which in reality, like that's great for a very, very select few people who go on to amazing things in a lot of cases, right? Like Michael Jordan as an athlete, or Jeff Bezos as an entrepreneur. That they really do that, but most of us aren't going to be happy that way. And so having other things to draw energy from and be happy about and kind of help round out our existence and our days are going to help with that mindset and help us recharge and bring that passion to other areas of our life as well.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that, with the world of social media, we see the glorified success of all of these people and what the money can buy and how happy they look, or also how awesome you are to be able to say you're hustling, like, oh, I'm grinding, so that means that I matter in this world. And one big place in my heart that I volunteer for the Special Olympics and the special needs community very, very heavily. From a voluntary role, actually still in Ohio, I am the sports director of Special Olympics competitive cheer, and I've done 5Ks for them. I've coached their track team, all of the above, and just very much got involved with that community. But my very first event that I ever volunteered at, and this already was a huge point in my life that drives me every day, even from my coaching business, is on the back of the shirts, it says the only disability is a bad attitude. And I am blessed to work with these amazing individuals every single day who are told they can't do something because of a certain disability. Or there's other people who get so consumed by the label of what it is that they do for work that they forget that they are still a person outside of that identity. And so whether it's a disability, maybe even it's an amazing strength, like knowing not to just get so focused on that label as if that's all that you are. Like one of my least favorite questions to get asked is, what do you do? How about, hi, my name is Jayme. How about you get to know me? Like, I am a coach, yes, but there's more to me than that, you know, and so is every person that you meet, and you can add just as much value in those areas of life and feel fulfilled rather than just hustling and saying you made a lot of money. Because at the end of the day, when you're in the grave, that's not what people are going to care to remember you for.
Sure. And again, it's, I think, having a clear understanding of why you're doing something, right? Like, I mean, again, obviously caring what other people think about us has been something that's been going on for decades, if not centuries, right? Like that's something that it's hard to completely avoid or take out of your mind. But at the same point in time, like, again, the Michael Jordan who wants to spend 18 hours a day trying to become the best basketball player ever, but then comes off as a bit of a jackass when he's in the documentary because he had that single-minded focus. But if he's happy doing that, then great for him, and he doesn't have to have a great circle of friends. But someone else who's like, hey, I just want to I want to hopefully somewhat enjoy my job, but have a lot of fun with my friends and travel and see things and experience other aspects of life. Like you don't have to judge yourself against your neighbor who has completely different goals with what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think that's probably one of the trickiest things to do, because I think it's just the way our mind works is in comparing stuff. And so comparing us with others, and then now it's so much easier to see it, right? Like again, 20, 30 years ago, you'd maybe notice it because of the house someone lived in or the car someone drove, maybe because of the clothes they wore. But now you can see every little thing they do. You can see where they went out to eat because they posted that to Instagram. You can see, every single little vacation they go on and where they went and what they did. And so it just makes it compounds that the ability to find those things to want to compare against when that's something you shouldn't be doing to begin with.
Absolutely. And see, that's the other thing too, is getting so caught up in the expectation of the highlight reels that people post on social media. Is okay, yeah, you see somebody showing where they went out to eat and how great of an experience it was, but what they didn't tell you was their kids screaming their head off and like throwing food all over the floor and them almost getting kicked out of the restaurant. Like, we glorify what we see because like that's that comparisonitis creeping in on like where we're like, oh, they have life so much better than me. Oh, if I just had this, I would be happy. Oh my gosh, I would kill to have that kind of money because then all of a sudden I would be happy. But if we can actually filter out of that lens and focus more in on our mindfulness and being present in what it is that we actually have in front of us, that's going to help eliminate how much we're comparing to others. Probably not in its entirety. I do think that it does still serve us because that is still a form that still motivates us to become better. So it's not all a bad thing to compare yourself. Just depending on, even water can kill you, right? Like there's always a balance. but I think that's your thing, is just when you can learn how to become more mindful. I can't tell you how many times I jump on like an initial call with a client and they're like, okay, this is what I want. This is why, here's how. And I'm like, okay, so let me do some digging. And then all of a sudden we dig, and all of what they just told me initially they wanted, they don't actually want. They just amplified this vision on this false reality as if that was going to bring them happiness. And if they actually focus in and work their butt off to achieve that, now they're sitting there in this goal and they're still not happy. I like to call it like, it's the same type. Everybody has an addiction of some sort. Like you have somebody who's addicted to drugs, alcohol, working out, music, whatever. But people are also addicted to their jobs. Like that's their drug of choice. They get high off of hitting the next goal, making X amount of money, but then all of a sudden they need the next fix because it didn't match that vision that they created outside of it. And then they totally weren't even being present and enjoying the process. They were just chasing this high of what life would be like if they hit that goal.
Yeah, very much so. So you mentioned kind of that first call that you have with clients. So what are some things that people can do to try to maybe recognize that the things that maybe they're prioritizing or that they think are important, to either potentially reaffirm that they are. Hopefully, most of the people who have those goals, it is truly what they want, and try to get there, or to have an idea of understanding, hey, maybe this isn't what I want. It's just, what I say I want or what I think I want because it's what society says or what I grew up believing I should want.
Great question. So twofold. One, first of all, the step one is take the time. Actually be present and like sit down and like interview yourself. Ask those questions. Like Tony Robbins does this tactic, and I love it. Like you ask yourself this initial question, or you say you have this goal, and then be that annoying little child. But why? But why? But why? And just keep digging and like ask yourself that like 7 times. Like actually take the time to sit with yourself. No other influence. Just sit with yourself and actually get to know yourself. COVID, that's actually a big area where my business really took off, is because people couldn't run from their problems. They were isolated. They were stuck having to sit with the demons that lied within, and they didn't know how to face it because everybody was hiding behind a mask. And now you can't run. Like in the scary movie is how Jason is walking and you're running, and somehow he always catches up with you, right? Like that's exactly what happens. So somebody actually just taking the time. But I also, even as a coach myself, I have coaches. I invest in coaching for me to help me sharpen my tools, but to be my blind spots. They're going to help me be better because I can justify everything within my own head. I can read and I'm going to pick apart the bits and pieces from books, from podcasts, from whatever it is to take the information on how I want to make it make sense. Doesn't mean that it actually is the best way to be seeing things. So as a coach, like having somebody be your blind spot to hold you accountable to make that time and be like, listen, this is what you want. Okay. What's this real expectation for it? And then what happens? Why is it that you think you haven't been happy in the past? What would really changing that be? What's the best case, worst case scenario? Like actually making them sit with those thought processes and challenge their perspective. Like that's a key phrase of mine. I even say I train brains and shift perspectives. I'm not here to tell you what you're doing is right or wrong. I'm here to challenge your normal way of thinking to get out of your own way. So that is why I think that's what I think is the next step, and why I think it's so important that whether it's me or anybody else, every single freaking human should have a coach. We have our kids have coaches, right? Why all of a sudden as adults do we think we don't need them?
Well, everyone's seen it firsthand where they're like, why is that person in that relationship? Right. Like that's kind of the one that always gets you. But then a lot of people, when you're in the relationship, you can't see that you shouldn't be in the relationship. Right. And so that's probably the most glaring, obvious kind of example that I usually see for people that's easy to relate to, right? Like, oh, I can't believe that why would they stay together, or that they're right for each other. But when you're in it, it's just, there's, your mind excuses things or
sees what it wants to see.
Yeah. And so it just makes it harder to make those changes. And again, in a lot of cases, it changing something, the fear of the unknown is obviously one of the biggest fears for people. And so, great that this situation isn't good, but if I get out of it, where will I be? And so just that unknown of what else would happen is worth, for a lot of people, not doing anything.
Absolutely. Analysis paralysis. There's so many different things that it could be, and then it scares you, so you just don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Perfect analogy. I agree.
That's always a tricky one. Yeah. So you mentioned how long have you had your business for then?
So I've had Jayme Shiarla coaching for 3.5 years now.
Okay. And what specifically got you started doing that business?
So I had actually found out of the UK to become certified as a life coach and NLP practitioner. So just going through that course and getting certified, I just very much was starting to recognize more of what my niche was. And a lot of that still did very much relate to my story. And I don't believe in being that coach is like, oh, if I can do it, you can do it too. And this is how I do it. So this is how you're going to do it. But I very much can relate to a lot of different categories of people that come to me. So I've been blessed to say that because of me actually getting my certification out of the UK, when I initially started my business, the majority of my clientele was outside of the US. So that's also why my business was kind of virtual from day one. But yeah, just kind of my own mess became my message, but then also just recognizing that like there is a different way to shift this perspective. I like to refer to it as the junk that's sitting up in the attic upstairs. Everybody has all of these boxes that have been sitting there for years and you're overwhelmed. You don't want to deal with it, but it's time to unpack that. So I had to do that myself. And I just very much enjoy being a part of that process with others. So that's kind of what led me to that.
Nice. And then obviously with it being virtual, you said you moved down to Austin. Is it something that you had considered ever making more of a physical presence, meet people one-on-one kind of situation? I mean, and COVID has probably expedited that, away from doing that. But initially, in a lot of cases, when people start a business, you're kind of taking clients where you can. And so that, part of the nice advantage of virtual is that you can get clients from all over the world to help build that client base. But has it been something where you had considered doing more local in-person kind of things as well too, or not really how you've been trying to grow your business?
From a group coaching standpoint and with my wellness retreats in person, absolutely. I kind of, planted this seed a little bit earlier, but primarily I do the one-on-one coaching and I will never take that in person. And the reason being is because when I meet with my clients, I meet with them through Zoom and I record the sessions. And because in general, I think about if you have to go to a seminar or a conference that's work related, you're probably only going to retain about 30% of what you hear in that conference. And then if you don't implement any of what was actually taken within like the first 24 hours, it's gone. And so for me, I think it'd be weird to be recording somebody in person, but when I record these sessions, I make them watch it back so I can call BS on them and be like, listen, you don't just have to take my word for it. You get to know yourself from the outside, like view, like you're looking across the screen at you. You're hearing your voice. You're seeing the way your mannerisms are. You're able to now see like, oh, like if I say something and it like triggers you, I'll be like, Troy, you really didn't like that I said that. And you'll be like, what are you talking about? Like, just watch when you see this playback and you see your body language shift or your tone change. In your mind, you're thinking something else, but now you get to see you firsthand on what that reality is. That relationship, you are now able to pull yourself out of it and see what everybody else sees. So I will never take it in person for that reason.
Interesting. Yeah, and I could see where it would definitely be beneficial for people to, one, like say, to see themselves from that third person, like we were talking about, how it's sometimes easier to be critical of an event when you're seeing it from the outside, but also as a good note-taking tool for them as well too, right? They can probably look at their past sessions for either a time or indefinitely, and so that's probably beneficial and useful for them from time to time to be able to go in and say, hey, I know it's another week or whatever before I meet with Jayme, but let me go in and get that little kickstart refresher about why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. And think about it like with a coaching aspect with sports. When you watch films, when your head is in the game and you're in the middle of it, you thought you did one thing, but then when you're able to see, hey, let's check tape. Oh, maybe I thought I actually did that. I didn't travel. I swear I didn't travel. I was at the motion. I didn't travel. I know I didn't. Well, watch the tape. Yeah, you did. You know what I mean? Like you're able to now recognize that. And that's how you can also track your progress too. But, as a coach, like I said, no one's broken and I'm not here to fix them. I'm here to just get in the trenches with them and support them along their journey and help them grow.
Nice. So what's an ideal client for you?
My ideal client is definitely the person who chooses work as their drug of choice. The I'll be happy when syndrome. I'm burnout. I'm running on fumes. Nobody will help me. I have to be the strong person and I show up and on paper, my life looks great, but I'm just really not feeling fulfillment in what it is that I'm doing. That's the ideal person that I work with. About 45% of my business is men. So men and women alike. I coach, whether they are a stay-at-home mom, whether they're a business owner, whether they work For a corporation, doesn't matter. It's just mainly somebody who is really seeking more fulfillment in what it is that they're doing, and they just feel like they're on the verge of a burnout, they are in a burnout, or they're just stuck going through the motions.
So the three categories you mentioned, I'm sure there's another. So like in the stay-at-home parent, small business owner or whatever, and the corporate employee, what are kind of maybe the biggest differences that those three categories seem to run into, or are they usually very similar? It's just, what gets them to that point.
They are very, very similar because, like I said, the drug of choice would just be, hey, I have to pour all of my energy into making sure my kids are taken care of because that's all I am, is I'm a stay-at-home mom. Or, hey, I'm running my business, and if my business fails, I don't matter in this world. Or, hey, unless I'm at the top of the food chain within this corporation, I won't be happy. No matter what, it's still the same thing, just that the type of work is a little bit different. Primarily, I would say the type of personality I work best with, because I do qualify my clients. I won't just work with anybody one-on-one. It's usually the type A personalities, very similar to mine, that the work ethic's there. It's just genuinely being able to have somebody to call them on their BS, that they feel safe enough to do so. Or it's what I like to call the silent driver, the person who is very scared to use their voice, but they always keep their head down and they just grind. The personality type is usually probably the biggest differentiator that I would say, but it's still the person who is coachable and they're just ready to put the work in. They just don't want to have to face that stuff alone.
Sure. At least you definitely have to be, and generally I would imagine when people reach out to you, they're most of the time ready to put that work in, because that's one of the reasons that they've decided to reach out. But yeah, like I say, you can't help someone help them unless they want to help themselves. So that's Absolutely. Always a big thing that way. For people who want more information either about your coaching, or I know, again, you're busy on a few different social platforms to try to just give great information to people every day. What are the best places for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I love when people cyberstalk me. As you mentioned, I post, whether it's motivational content, tough love content, food for thought content, I post every single day. So I have my Facebook page, which is Jayme Shiarla Coaching. I have my Instagram page, which is Jayme the Coach. And then I also have my website, which is www.jaymeshiarlacoaching.com. I do actually have a blog on there too that kind of goes a little bit more in the feels and gives somebody the opportunity to get to know me a little bit better too. But then also a lot of those stories tend to relate with a lot of people. So that's usually the best place to start. I do have a Facebook group too, but that's usually after the fact that once we've connected. So you can find me on all of the above.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, I really appreciate taking the chance, or taking the time to jump on the call and talk a little bit about it. I know mindset, again, especially during COVID and how everything, a lot of people were required to kind of confront stuff that maybe they had been able to kind of keep to the side, has been a more and more important topic of discussion, and rightfully so. And so hopefully some people will find this valuable.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me and sharing my story and what it is that I do.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Hope you guys all have a wonderful day.